Should a credit shelter trust still be established at the first spouse's death, or with portable credit is that type of planning obsolete? As I mentioned before, funding the trust on the first spouse's death gets the growth on the credit out of the estate, and that's very beneficial. Ensures that the funds in the trust will be preserved for the family, protection from remarriage, and protects the credit in the event that future legislative action results in a reduction of the lifetime exemption. So we mentioned all of those. Do you all know what GST is? Generation skipping tax. All right? This is a real great estate planning technique. Let's assume we didn't, let me explain to you why we have the generation skipping tax, and you'll understand how it works. Let's assume that I have an estate, let's say I'm worth $100 million. And I know I'm going to be subject to estate taxes at my death. And I'm not happy about it, but I know it. And my kids, they already have a fairly sizable estate of their own, and they're going to be collecting more money as a result of my death. And ultimately, when they die, it's going to go to their kids, and there's going to be a second estate tax. So I say, we could do two things. We could either leave all of the money to the grandchildren, and by doing that, we're going to skip a level of taxation. That money will be taxed just once at the grandparent's death, not at the parent's death or the grandchild's. It'll go to the grandchild, skipping that middle generation. And that would avoid one level of estate tax. But I want my kids to use that money. So I say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave it to my kids in trust, like the credit shelter trust I mentioned before, where they'll get the right to use it during their lifetime. And they'll have certain invasion powers, but they don't get to control where it goes at their death, and they don't get the right to take all of it. So when they die, it's not included in their estate. So it then goes to the grandchildren. So I effectively skipped a generation of tax. So I put my whole $100 million into that, and then I say, well, hold on a second. If I can do that, why should I have it pay out to my grandchildren at all? I'll give my grandchildren the same rights I gave my children, the right to use it during their lifetime, and then it goes to my great-grandchildren, and then my great-great-grandchildren, so on and so forth down the line. That's called a dynasty trust. The money gets taxed once and only once, and then it goes on and on and on, forever and ever and ever being subject to estate taxes unless we run into a statute, a rule against perpetuities issue, which incidentally we don't have in New Jersey. Well, Congress quickly realized that if you could do this, this would eliminate the effectiveness of the estate and gift tax. So what they did was they implemented a generation skipping tax, which is if you do a transaction like this and there's money going to what's defined as a skip person, then there is another tax, a generation skipping tax, which is sort of a backstop to the estate and gift tax. All right? But there's a certain amount of money you ought to be able to pass to future generations without being subject to this generation skipping tax. No congressman wanted to file a generation skipping tax return because he made a $50 gift to his grandchild on his birthday. So there's an exemption, and the exemption has been going up. It's now $5 million. Last it was $3.5 million, now it's $5 million. And in fact, in 2010, there was a generation skipping tax holiday for those of you who had clients that took advantage of it. But there's a $5 million generation skipping tax exemption per person. So a husband gets a $5 million and a wife gets a $5 million. But it's not portable. So if the husband leaves everything to the wife and they wanted to do generation skipping planning, the wife only has a $5 million exemption. Would have been better off for the husband to have set up a trust during his life or at his death to use his $5 million exemption so that that's not wasted. So again, another reason why these trusts make sense. And again, it avoids the de reduction in the event of a second marriage of a surviving spouse.